What's up, fight fans? Welcome to DFS Insights, where we break down every UFC card using our custom-built predictive math model. With over 650 fights analyzed, we're hitting around 70% accuracy and even closer to 80% when we remove fighters with fewer than 3 UFC bouts. So there's no hype, no bias, just the data. So let's go ahead and dive into what math says about this week's matchup, UFC 317, Topuria versus Oliveira. All right, before we dive into these math predictions, go ahead and make sure you hit that like, subscribe, notification bell. It does help out our channel. We're a small channel. We're still growing, so we just want to, get put out there in front of more people. So we got this week coming up, UFC 317. We got 2 belts on the line: Topuria versus Oliveira and Pantoja versus Kaikara France. This seems to be a pretty awesome card if you're a fight fan. However, looking here at the math models, it's pretty dicey in my opinion. A lot of basically 50-50 fights here. So looking up here, Topuria versus Oliveira, one of the main events there. 56% chance for Topuria. Pantoja sitting around 54% chance to win, so that's, to me, roughly about a 50-50 fight. Then you got Joshua Vaughn coming in at about 72% chance. That seems like a good one, even though that could be a little bit closer, but the math is showing Joshua Vaughn coming in at a pretty high favorite. Then you got Moicano versus Dariush. That's another 50-50. Lima and Talbert. This looks like our first upset. However, if you do look, Lima is a fighter with that is highlighted yellow. The yellow is the fighters that I indicate as basically less than 3 UFC bouts. So Lima currently has 2 according to UFCstats.com. That's where the stats that I used, the 8 stats that they provide there. So, with that being the grain of, take it with a grain of salt for the yellow fighters, even though this one seems to be closer than normal. Gregory Rodriguez coming in about 52% against Hermanson. Delgado is another one versus Emil. Delgado also is a yellow fighter. I believe he doesn't even have a fight in, so the math is pretty skewed there, so you might want to do a little extra research. Tracy Cortez, our first women's fight of the night, about 60% chance to beat Vivian. Terrence McKinney coming in about 85% chance there. Dance is going against Hines. I don't believe Hines has a UFC fight under his belt, so that's why it's showing Dance at about 87%. And then similar to with the Jacoby Smith, he doesn't have too many fights under his belt. I believe it's just 1. And so by what I mean by where I pull the stats from, if we switch over here to the UFCstats.com, this is where I pull basically the 8 stats for the fights. So as previously mentioned here, if I pull up Jacoby Smith fights, you can clearly see his stats here are pretty high. 7.3 significant strikes per minute, 70% chance. Takedown defense 0%. I know throughout his career that's going to be adjusted, and also the takedown average at 11.5. So this is what I mean by the fighter's data might be skewed. Is he going to average 11.5 takedowns his whole career? Probably not. So that's why I like to go typically after 3 fights of data. It seems to be a little bit more evened out. Fighters that have 10, 15, those averages are where I'm looking for too, because that kind of seems this is how the fighter fights. So with those fighters, take that into consideration. Those are the yellow fighters, and what we mean by their data might be skewed. So how I determine who is the favorites for my calculations, I basically use UFC best fight odds. That just kind of gives me a glimpse into several different betting sites and where they see the fight. So currently this is the data that I'm using at this particular moment in time. So how I determine who's a favorite and who's not. it looks like, the Joshua Vaughn is basically kind of a break even. Even some of them have Royval as the favorite, where others have, Vaughn, and even Betway over there basically has it as a dead even. We just want to put out the best information that we can. As mentioned before, we're about 70% accuracy when we include the fighters. Even the yellow fighters, we're even closer to 80% when we take away the fighters that are yellow. So in this fight, it looks like there's 11. I believe one of the fights got postponed or canceled. So in this one, there are 4 fights that are yellow, so 7 that the data seems to be pretty reliable on. So with that, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, notification bell. We're going to be doing this breakdown with the math model every week, for these UFC fights going on basically here on out. I will be trying to also drop a video specifically for DraftKings. That's typically what I play. I can't do the money line betting, but this data right here, you can use it for any of your betting desires, whether that be DraftKings, FanDuels, money line betting, or whatever. This data could help you determine what potentially who's the winner. So with that, again, this is DFS Insights, breaking down, giving you the best math data that we could possibly give here for UFC 317, Topuria versus Oliveira. And with that, we'll see you on the next one.